So I want to give a big thank you to DoorDash for making this event possible and supporting us so much. And I'm going to pass it over to Cordell to give a little bit of an intro before our event.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Anna. And good morning, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Cordell Zachary. My pronouns are he, him, his. And today I just wanted to really give you some insight into DoorDash as a brand. We have two amazing inch leaders, so I don't want to take any time away from them. But I figured I just tell a little bit of the backstory about who we are at DoorDash. So when you think about where it all started at Stanford University, where Tony, Andy, and Stanley were in a macaroon shop. And they just really started to observe and look around. And they saw that, there's some awesome merchants, restaurants, store owners who want to get to their customers. They want to deliver orders, but they didn't have a fleet. So they started to work on a product. They started to ideate. And at night, they started to deliver food as our first true DoorDash fleet. And that's how DoorDash came about. So now, fast forward to today, DoorDash's mission is to grow and empower local economies. And if you go to the next slide, you can see what that looks like in action. So we can go to our next slide. And this is our, we call it our business flywheel. We can go back one more, Anna. I know it can be a little tricky. Yep, perfect. So when we think about our business flywheel, we hope to provide local communities access to food and goods. So that's our restaurants and merchants and owners, but also how do we get customers access to those products as well, while also providing earning opportunities for our Dashers. So when you look at how this all works together, we hope to create a community that thrives and is empowered through our product and our offerings. And our newest campaign is called A Neighborhood of Good. And the whole premise of that is that DoorDash is a connector, an amplifier of the good work that the community is doing where we work, live, and play. So that's how it all looks together. And I think that's really important as we look at our offerings. It's moving past restaurants, it's going into grocery, it's going into wine and liquor and pet supplies. So we hope to grow and continue to build this neighborhood of good. So we can go to the last slide we have. And just want to talk about us as our employer brand that we have. So when we think about why we would want you to work for us, when we look at our benefits, we recently put out a really cool article about our flexibility of work. We're really expanding our reach in terms of where our roles are located. We have competitive pay. We also have unlimited PTO for our salaried workers. We have an awesome package for benefits. And we definitely have a slew of different roles open today. We're continuing to grow. I'll be sharing an interest form for candidates who are interested in talking to recruiters and learning more. So you'll see me kind of engage in the chat as we go along. But also we have 4 roles open on our the Women Who Code job board. So check those out. I think we have product, an Android role open. So feel free to check those out there. But right now, we just have an awesome global community. It was really cool to see everybody where they're located in the chat. Hopefully you can find a role that's near you. But if you don't, feel free to reach out to us. I'm sure, hopefully, Anna, you share information, but I'm totally happy to chat and share more if you reach out on LinkedIn. But yeah, really excited to have you all here today and learn more. So I'll hand it back to Anna.
Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that we can get into the panel. Thank you so much, Cordell, for that introduction. So I am thrilled to welcome our panelists today. I'm going to pass it to them to give a brief introduction. So we can start with you, Varsha. Can you share a little bit, like you said a little what you wanted to be when you grew up, but why tech? What was the spark? Yeah. A little bit about your journey and then what you do at DoorDash.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Varsha. I'm a director of engineering at DoorDash. Growing up, like I said, I wanted to be different. I wanted to follow different careers. And then I accidentally started coding. And I just loved coding so much. I felt like I was made for it. So followed my passion and became an engineer. And that's my career joy story. I have been with DoorDash for 5 years, so I'm one of the OGs from back in 2017. And all these years, I've seen DoorDash go from like a small company to a unicorn and now like a public company. So it's really exciting to see this journey and be a part of it. And what I do there, over the 5 years, I've done different things. I've built and managed different teams across DoorDash. I started off with merchant teams, which is basically making products and services for businesses. And then from there, I moved to anti-fraud team for a short period. And right now I manage Dasher engineering teams. So that's been my journey. Pass it on to Liangxiao.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liangxiao, and currently I'm a VP of engineering at DoorDash. How I get to the software engineering is because, as I mentioned, my father is an engineer, but he's a hardware engineer. He liked to invent things. Often I remember, like when I was young, like he's worried about cannot find a good software engineer to make the things he invented to work. Then I said, like maybe when I grow up, I want to be a good software engineer, can help my father. So that's where I am. That's why I started to learn computer science. Yeah. So before, I've been with DoorDash for like 7 months now. And before that, I was at Meta for almost 10 years. And before that was Microsoft. And at DoorDash, I'm leading their like new verticals engineering team. So for people like who knows DoorDash, probably knows DoorDash as a food delivery company. But our company mission is really connecting all the local store with everyone, with a user, and make your life like much easier to like purchase things. So that's why DoorDash started all the like local like new verticals, which including convenience for you to get like ice creams, chips, and over-the-counter drugs, or grocery, or retails, alcohols, like flowers, all different new verticals.
Thank you so much, both of you. I think you also showed really like that it's something that people use every day. I have to admit that I did get DoorDash last night. So let's start with you, Liangxiao. Since you just joined DoorDash recently, and this is all about like choosing a job, finding the right culture. So why did you choose DoorDash during your job hunt? And how did you know your priorities for your next position?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I've been with like Facebook for like, or Meta for almost 10 years. So I still like Meta, like as a company, and I learned a lot and during my journey. And after 10 years, I'm really asking myself, like, what makes me happy, right? So is that to manage a huge team? Or like, is that building something really interesting, or build something 0 to 1, or solve like hard problems? So what I get is I will be more passionate about is building something 0 to 1, as well as solve hard problems, right? It's not about managing huge orgs, right? So with that, I was thinking about is I actually started exploring inside Facebook as well as outside of Facebook, right? And then I made top two criteria for me. One is I need to believe in the future of the company. And the second is the culture has to be the culture I would love to like be within, right? So I talked to a bunch of unicorn companies and I actually get all the offers. And then why DoorDash? I think it's, as I mentioned, is like this local commerce vision really excites me. I had to see the trend of the world starting to going towards local commerce. I feel really excited about it, as well as the leadership is really strong. I seen the execution is so tight that it really raised my confidence in the company, right? And at the same time, I talked to many people and I found the culture is the culture I really like. I want to be like a worker in that kind of environment. So that's why I decided to join DoorDash. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So the next question is for Varsha, and we'll come back to you, Liangxiao, because we have more culture questions. But you know, Liangxiao was talking about searching. So you know, we have our audience is from many different levels. Probably most of our community is mid-level, a little bit less senior than you are now. So how do people find these good opportunities that we're talking about? How do they find it?
Yeah, the question's for me, right?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay, awesome. So listening to Liangxiao's answer, I felt like, I have a framework for finding good opportunities, and her example fits like 100% into it, right? So let's walk through this framework, and you will be able to correlate how Liangxiao's thought process in actually finding DoorDash actually 100% matches this framework, right? So step one of this framework is basically introspection, right? Like, what do you really want in your next job, right? So introspect about yourself, right? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are you passionate about, right? What will make you happy and make you wake up and come to work every day and do the things you want, that's ahead of you, right? Every day. So that's A. B, what are your career aspirations, right? Like, what do you want to grow in terms of like, in the next 2-3 years, do you want to grow your career? In Liangxiao's case, she didn't really want a large org, but she wanted to do good work, right? So what are your career aspirations really? And then what kind of companies are you looking for, right? Like, size of the company really matters. If you are looking for, more fast-paced environment, right? Like, choose a smaller company. It will definitely have no structure, no processes. It will definitely need a lot more autonomy from your part to go get your own job done. But you will get a wide breadth of opportunities to work on, which are going to teach you a whole lot more. And of course, there's going to be risk as well in a smaller company. So are you ready to take that risk, right? Because the rewards are higher, but then the risk, are you ready to take that, right? So taking all of these criteria in mind, kind of do some introspection and form your checklist, right? Like, what are you really looking for, right? And then put your priorities together, saying, okay, do you want money? Do you want more learning? Do you want more growth opportunities? Is culture important to you? Good manager important to you? Like, what are your criterias and what is the priority of those, right? So once you have that, then you start preparing, right? And that's step 2. So as part of preparing, I would say, mentally prepare yourself that this is not an easy task. It is going to definitely take time. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's a full-time job if you already have a job. Post your job, you have to like put effort in like applying and learning and being prepared, right? So prepare, brush up your skills, be really, really prepared. Also kind of apply the reverse psychology, the checklist that you make, right? What is it that's important to you? Is your resume really shining those things, right? Like shining those skills that, you want to look for in your job. So build your resume, which is short, good, and then also highlights your skills, the right skills, right? And then once you have your resume, once you have basically, your checklist, and once you kind of are mentally prepared, then you kind of start applying, right? Also, LinkedIn, I think, is a good source. So keep LinkedIn up to date. One tip is that most companies today don't even use PDF resumes, right? So mostly we just float around LinkedIn URLs, right? So LinkedIn, super, super important. Make sure it's up to date. And then in the process of applying, I would also say that LinkedIn Premium really came handy. So even 5 years ago, when I found DoorDash, it was because I paid for LinkedIn Premium and a recruiter got in touch with me. So I would really recommend LinkedIn Premium. Glassdoor is another avenue. Go apply. So step 3 is like go apply, right? And then you will start getting like a lot of calls from recruiters from other places. The one advice here is don't rush, right? So like Liangxiao said, she had a few opportunities in hand. That's a good place to be, right? Like, how can you really have a few opportunities in hand at the same time that you can look at them and decide for yourself what is good, what is for you, what is better for you, right? So with that, I would say, like, when you start speaking with recruiters and when you start getting these phone calls, right? Ask them, what is the process? How long does it take from phone screen to on-site to getting the offer, right? And then try to backtrack the timeline from there. Try to keep it like 2 months away, right? Like, and start applying for other positions and start giving your phone screen dates such that basically you can get all of the offers at the same time. I think that's a good tip and a good way to, get multiple at the same time and then make your choices. So those are the tips. So that's a framework. And then I want to give you one single tip. Key LinkedIn Premium, when recruiters look for candidates, they actually look for keywords. So make sure your LinkedIn profile has keywords that your ideal job profile needs. And also, like, a lot of companies have a big push in hiring diversity, increasing the diversity numbers. And so for that, one tip that we have been given and like we look for is looking for like pronouns, she, her. So having those pronouns also next to your name kind of helps with like some of like shining a little bit in front of the recruiters. So that's my pro tip, and that's the framework to find good opportunities.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you've shared a lot of tips, many that I've never heard before, but one that really stood out was planning your career and like planning your ideal and then working backwards to make sure that your resume fits that. I think that is absolutely incredible. So Varsha spoke a little bit about looking for the good opportunities, all like that. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Liangxiao. Companies are always putting their best foot forward, of course. So how do you get a true understanding, like what the day-to-day of the opportunity, especially as we're thinking about culture?
Yeah, so I would say, of course, like when you apply a job, people try to sell you, right? So like, I would say you need to come to be prepared. As Varsha already mentioned, is know your priorities, know what you want, right? Then after that, maybe come up with a list of questions, which can do like a deep dive into those priorities, right? And then when you're talking to recruiters or every single interviewers, and it's a chance for you to ask those set of questions. Do not be afraid to ask repeated questions. I actually really encourage you to ask the same question to different people so you can get a true understanding, because different people has different view. So that will help you to get a complete view, especially you ask those questions to engineers, not managers, right? So that will get you like a really, really true understanding, like, what it is this opportunity is about and what's the company culture is look like, etc. And also, like, typically when I see like people like come into interview, like when you think about those list of questions to ask, and people will ask the culture and like people you work with, and also what is the future of the company and the work you will be focused on and your career goals. So those, I would say, those 5 areas I really suggest people to thinking about the questions around those areas to ask. But of course, you need to know what's your priority is and pick a few areas which you want to emphasis on.
Yeah, when we were preparing for this event, we spoke a little bit about the difference between culture add and culture fit. So before we start talking more specifically about culture, I would love, I know Liangxiao, you had a lot to say about that, but before we move into the company culture questions that we have, could you speak a little bit more about that? And Varsha as well, feel free to unmute if you have anything.
Yeah, I think like culture fit and culture add is like 2 different concepts, right? Mm-hmm. So culture fit, I will start with the culture fit, is first of all, you need to understand who you are, what type of things you like, right? And do you like a culture which people really like, let's say, like innovations, or like always like a brainstorm and a move fast and a very scrappy like environment? Or do you like something more like, say, very think through deep into the technology? Or like those are the things you need to ask yourself, what type of environment you like, right? So that I think that will be the first step. Then when you talk about culture fit, of course, you need to know what's the culture the other side looks like, right? Not just you, right? So what the culture the other side looks like is more like, as I said, like ask a bunch of questions around the culture and probably read the blogs of the company, really understand what's the company value is about and what they care about, right? And then then you can ask questions around those values, because people might have a different interpretation of those values, right? To get the true meaning of what those values means during the day-to-day job for people. So you can get a really good understanding. And also, let's say when you sense about culture is when you like interviewing, talking with the people during the interview, actually the people's attitude, the question they ask you, you can sense a little bit about the culture as well. So yeah, I'll pass over to Varsha, like anything like she would like to add.
Yeah, how do you get a true understanding, Varsha, of a company's culture? Yeah. What questions would you ask?
Yeah, I think Liangxiao put it well. So again, like, you know, thinking about like step by step about like, how do you assess a company's culture? I think step one there is that company assesses your culture also. So let's start with that, right? Like, so most companies today have core values, like Liangxiao said, and most of them are published, right? Like DoorDash has its own core values. We are leaders, we are learners, we are doers, we have bias for action and all of that, right? And then we are one team, like we work together with each other. Well, we are humble, good. We teach each other, learn from each other, right? So those are our core values, right? And then remember that a company will always assess you for these core values, right? So make sure that you research what the company's core values are, and then you have good examples for them, right? Like, for example, what brings you here to DoorDash is like a common question you ask, and most companies ask, what brings you here, right? And so like kind of relating back to the core values, saying, I love like fast-paced environment. I love bias for action. That's a core value that really resonated with me. And therefore, you know, that brings me here, right? Or so that's a good way of like, you know, thinking of examples before thinking of like obvious questions that may come to you, like what feedback do you get from people around you? What's a constructive feedback that, you know, people give you around, and then showing your learning as part of that, you know, are good ways of like showing the company that you are fitting into their culture, right? Like just to give an example. And now the other way around, like how do you assess what are the company's values, right? I think for that, again, we have to start with like, what are your own core values, right? Like we spoke about the company's core values, and most companies today have core values. Have we ever thought about personal core values? Like I should have core values for myself, right? So what are my own core values? What do I look for? I want to work with good people. I want a good manager who will support and guide me. Maybe those are my top two, and maybe you can have your top 3 or 4 or 5, right? And then go prepared with questions for that, right? Like, for example, I am a very, very active interviewer, and a lot of people come to me with questions, and I can assess that they are trying to assess our culture, right? So questions are like, what is the one thing that you like about DoorDash? What keeps you here at DoorDash, right? That's a good question to ask your interviewer, an IC who's going to be your peer, or a manager who's going to be, you know, who you are going to be reporting to. Second is like, what is the one thing that you would change about DoorDash is another question I get a lot, right? So basically, there you will hear things that are not so good about the company and like how they're operating. And then things like, hey, if I have an idea, you know, how do I, which is impactful and good for the company, how do I go about making it happen? Will you support me? Will you like let me take it up? And what is the process? Do you listen to your people? Give me one example where you've kind of supported an idea that's coming bottom up, right? So those are the good questions which, you know, you first find your own core values, and then frame your questions around it, and then ask the people who's interviewing you about it. And I think that's like a good way to like match both fit into company's culture as well as like assess company culture in return for your own core values.
I love that question about if I have an idea, who do I bring it to? I think that is just excellent. So now that we've talked about kind of looking behind the curtain, seeing what the culture, let's talk a little bit about both of you are leaders. You're somewhat responsible for keeping the culture and keeping it going. So as Cordell mentioned, DoorDash has expanded a lot in the past few years. Liangxiao, you've only been here 1 year, but Varsha, you've been there much longer. So I'd love to hear from both of you in your experience, given that it's expanded a bit recently. How do you maintain that culture how do you maintain the culture? We can start with you, Liangxiao, just because Varsha went last, and then we'll go to Varsha.
Actually, I will let Varsha start first because
Okay.
she has been with the DoorDash for like 5 years. She had seen the company from 0 to 1, now become 1 to 10, right? So like I'll let Varsha to go first.
Yeah, I feel like, I have seen a lot of importance given to our culture at DoorDash from the time we were very small to even today that we're a giant company, right? And I think that is super important. We have a lot of support from top, from our management, all the way Tony Shu down. And I think that is super important. Like if the leaders of the company give importance to the culture, that's like step 1 to maintaining a good culture, right? And I think that also on the floor, there is constant awareness of what our culture is and what our core values are, right? And then integrating that into our day-to-day is like, I think it's done well, right? So I'll give you an example. So our day-to-day conversations, we bring up our cultures very often, right? Like for example, hey team, like this is a hard problem. We need 5 people to fix it. Like 1 team, 1 fight. Let's go, right? Like so that's how we kind of bring up our culture very often, right? Or hey, that was done really well. That showed really good bias for action, right? So using that terminology again and again, giving kudos and reward for it, I think that's one thing that we do very well. We constantly talk about our culture in our day-to-day language, and that keeps reminding us of our culture, right? And I feel like we do have a separate DEI department which talks about inclusivity and all of that. Yes, they do a lot of initiatives to actually support inclusivity at the workplace, like ERGs, biases training. Elevate is a very unique program. If you haven't read about DoorDash Elevate, I would really recommend you to go and read. It's like a unique opportunity. We give people to meet the leaders of the company, learn from them, and take some training, learn the business better, more closely, right? So Elevate they run, but that we don't just depend on a DEI central department to take control of the culture and inclusivity, right? I think as leaders, Liangxiao, myself also, we are very involved. We run programs such as like women mentorship circles, right? So basically we make circles of women, junior, senior, who help each other, meet once a month, answer questions from each other, be it organizational, be it leadership, be it technical, right? And then we have mentorship programs for engineers, for leaders. We attend conferences. We organize women in eng lunches, where forum for women to come together and help each other, right? So there's a lot that we do. We just keep it top of mind. And I'll let Liangxiao talk a little bit more about like culture now.
Yeah, so I would say it's like when I joined DoorDash, I think there's several things I observed the company doing really well. One is I would say the company leaders is leading by examples. So they are the role model of those cultures, right? So no matter during the way how they operate, right? Or like how they like in the meetings, in the reviews, in the product reviews, business reviews, they really promoting those cultures, right? How can we like move fast, bias to action, or how can we think about a 1 team, 1 fight? How can we be more optimistic as well as like care about the future, right? So those are make the right decisions. So those are the things like I would say leaders really like call it out and lead by examples. Another thing is really important, which I'm surprised to learn is when we do come to the NG evaluations, literally in the evaluations is write down what the people did to promote this culture, right? So which actually I do feel the incentive, the NG evaluation is a good way to keep the culture. Because that means like, hey, what type of culture will be get rewarded? What type of a culture we are against, right? Against means like if you really care about your own ownership, does not think about do the best thing for the customer. And this is something we will call it out, right, during the evaluation. So those are really good mechanism to like keep the company running and like with a good culture. And another thing I want to point out is no matter like from like a DoorDash or other companies, right? So when the company from 0 to 1 really small, and when the company from 1 to N, like I think the culture, even the same set of culture, but I would say will change a little bit, because the company is a different size and you cannot run with the like a same mindset. In that part, I feel like DoorDash as a company, like we did a really good job on, let's say, when the company become like a bigger, how do we translate those, how do we interpret those culture now at this environment, right? This really gives the people a really good guidance on, hey, how do we keep this culture? For example, let's say we always talk about bias to action, right? But a bias to action 0 to 1 means, hey, let's put in really hacky solution. Let's just get things done. Bias to action, let's work on, right? Right now, we still bias to action, but a bias to action really need to thinking about building some things can be reused. Right, so like that like I would say the interpretation change is really help the company still be able to keep this culture when the company grows.
Well, thank you so much. Our next question that I'd like to have you answer, Liangxiao, even though you just went. So the market, everything is very unstable. Like we can be honest about that. There are many unstable things. And I think it's great that we had this question because Justina in the chat already also asked it. So I think a lot of people are going through this right now. So what are some types of questions that you can ask to figure out the future of the company? So Justina in the chat shared with us, when the interviewers mentioned there's been a restructure recently in the org or people left, for example, what are some follow-up questions? I think that both of these things are pretty connected. So I would love to hear, your thoughts.
Yeah. This is a really, really good question. Actually, a lot of people interview with DoorDash always ask me this question, right? So what's the future of the company? Will the company be stable? Will you guys do layoffs, etc., right? So I actually think right now when the market is not stable, stock dropping like crazy, right? That's actually is a good testimony for the company. Can the company survive? Right? Mm-hmm. Because we have a lot of opportunities. Can the company is truly be able to know, to survive, to operate in the a really not great environment, right? So I always Tony always said in 2017, DoorDash is at a stage is always running into say we're gonna running out of money in a few months, running out of money, right? But the company survived. I think the company survived after this is a really strong company because the company knows how to execute in the lowest environment. And so that's why DoorDash in 3 years, from the market number 4 to market number 1, has a really a huge market share, right? So that type of company is, I think this stock really help you to look at find this type of company, how the company survive in the raw environment and what they do to survive the raw environment. Then several things you can also ask yourself, or you did do some research on is what is this area the company is operate at, right? So what is the future of this area? What's the market size for this area? For example, local commerce is a huge market size. It's a huge area, right? Because that will really help you to understand what's the future, what's the upskilling of the future for the company, right? And then you can also ask, let's say, hey, how's does the company, you can look at, does the company has a product market fit by look at the market share the company has, right? And how fast they grow in that area and how many users they have. So you can get a sense is hey, does the company has a market share? And also, let's say you can also ask things hey, if the company is not profitable yet, you can ask the managers or leaders saying, hey, what's their strategy to make the money, right? To make the company profit, right? So, and what's the strategy they have to grow the users as well? And also you can look at is like, what's the current execution of the company looks like? And can the company move fast or let's say pivot quickly when things change? And this will help you to like answer those questions is, can the company survive in those role environments? And another thing you can look at is how the company compare with the competitors and what is their winning levers and why do they stand out? You can ask the people, say, why does this, like, for example, why does DoorDash stand out? Why? So what is your secret sauce, right? So that will really help you to understand, like, is that something true you really resonate with? The company be able to, let's say, like grow really fast. And lastly, I would say is do some research of the company leaders and the founders, leaders, and that will give you more confidence on like the future of the company.
Thank you so much. I'm just looking a little bit, we're getting wonderful questions at the same time, so please keep them going. And a lot of the questions are very similar to ones that we prepared, so I'm thrilled to see this. So our next question, and this will be the last one, and then we'll focus more on the audience questions. But this one is shared also from an audience member and one that we wanted to talk about. So for Varsha, how do you figure out like that you're just gonna like the people that you work with? Like what are the signs for you?
Yeah, I do think that it's much easier in today's world to know what kind of people you'll work with, right? Because social media is out there, LinkedIn, Facebook, so many avenues for you to go find common connections in a company and to go and find out, you know, what the culture of the company is like, what the people are like, what the group is like, you know. And I think go to your LinkedIn, like go find your first connections, your second connections, go tell your first connections to introduce you to your second connections, and go find out if you can talk to someone that's internal and tell you more about the people. So that's one way. I think Glassdoor reviews is another way, right? And, you know, the interview tells you a lot, right? So asking, you meet so many, at least 4 to 5 people in an interview now. And I think assessing a little bit of like, how are they? How is their attitude? They're definitely on the driver's seat. So are they really respectful, though they are the driving member in the conversation, right? Are they humble good? You know, are they smiley and like cheerful? Or, you know, so those are the signs you can pick up a lot of attitude signals during the interview itself. Never be afraid to ask questions, like Liangxiao said. Ask them questions about, you know, like, what is your team like? You know, what do you like about the people on your team? You know, those questions kind of help you get signals as well. And then don't be afraid to ask your manager to speak to a peer, right? Like, I tell your manager, I want to speak to somebody on the team that's probably my level. And then ask them questions about like, hey, how long, when did you take your last vacation? If work-life balance is important to you, right? Like, and do you shut completely on like Saturday, Sundays, or do you work a lot? Or so asking questions directly to your peers is never a bad thing, you know, and asking the recruiter or your manager during the interview panel that you want to go speak to somebody on the team is also not a bad thing. So those are some ways. I feel like, you know, my favorite part about working at DoorDash is that I think I work with the best in the industry, right? So talent at DoorDash is what I learn from every day, and that makes me, you know, wake up every morning and come to work. And I do feel like DoorDash's engineering blog reflects that. So if innovation and working with the best talent in your industry is important to you, try looking for blogs from that company. Try looking for published material from that company, and that will give you a good sense of the caliber of people that work. And I think even that's an important factor to consider. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so glad you brought up work-life balance, because someone actually asked in the chat a little bit about work-life balance. So I hope you were writing down those questions. Those are very good questions to ask. So we have another question, a little bit about what does the career path generally look like? You can speak a little bit about DoorDash, but I think it really connects to what we were talking about is how do you learn about growth opportunities? How do you ask those questions to see what the career path is? And that's for whoever wants to answer it.
Maybe I can start on this, right? So for me, it's career path. So in general, I want to answer in the career path because a lot of people are always thinking about it is after they get to the senior ICs, right? So their only career path is to be a manager, to go up, right? So I actually do not think so, right? Myself being like IC for a long time, like if I was not asked to be a manager, probably I would be IC always, right? So for me is first of all, I always believe in you need to play your strengths, right? Knowing what you are good at, then knowing what you are passionate about, you will do the best of your job. So I would say no matter it's an IC route or manager route, you can always be leaders, no matter which route you take. And as a manager, I think you need to really care about people. I think the people part, people, culture, organization part is really important to be a manager to be successful, right? Because a manager is not saying dig deeper, solving the problems, is really empowering people around them to solve the problems. Right. So, but as I see the different paths is I see get to work on really interesting and hard challenges, right? And so I see need really passionate about the technologies, right? And then they lead by examples and do have followers. So then I saw someone really ask, let's say, how IC or manager become a leader, right? For me, the leader definition is not equals to be a manager. So anyone can be a leader. What's the definition of the leader? So leader basically is you take on the responsibility, you take on the initiative, lead larger efforts, right? So you can lead a larger efforts by bringing in the product vision strategy, or you can lead a large effort by drive the really hard technical decisions, right? You can lead by actually there's a lead by examples. A lot of people really follow you and copy what you have done, right? So those I would say is there's a different type of leaders. And in a company, I would say we need a different type of leaders to make the company to be successful. So that's my that's why I want to throw out the thoughts. So really encourage everyone here is really play your strengths. Know what's your a strength is, play your strength, what you are passionate about, right?
Yeah, I think that was a wonderful answer. Liangxiao, as always, talks frameworks and thought processes so well. Thank you, Liangxiao. Tactically adding to that, right? Extremely tactically asking questions. Again, I go back to giving tactical answers for people to take back. Tactically, you can ask questions to your manager or your future manager, saying, how often do you meet your people? How often do you have career conversations with them, right? And what is your framework? Are they written down expectations that you set with them or not? How do they know? So I get those questions a lot when I interview, right? And I think there's nothing wrong in asking those. So ask those questions ahead and you will know how invested the manager is in growing people on their team. If they think a lot and don't have off the bat answers, then maybe they're not doing as much of that. But those that do a lot of it will have ready-made answers, saying because that's the life they live every day, right? So having those conversations openly is another tactical add-on there.
Yeah, I want to add a little bit more here as well as a technical, tactical questions. So I think if you ask your career growth for a company during the interview, first you need to know what is the org and the team is about, right? Because people can tell you're going to work on the project. Then what is the project important? Is the project complexity is matching your level or help you to get on to the next level, right? So I would ask a question is hey, what is the team vision and the charter is how this led up to the company goals or org goals, right? So how important it is. Then what is the team structure? How ask the manager, how do you structure the team? For example, the manager tells you there's 3 parts, then you need to ask, hey, my project belongs to which part, or it's just I come in, leading the entire part, right? Then ask manager is also, let's say, what's the setup for me to get on to next level in your mind? Right. So it's not saying right now, but I would love to know what are the opportunities there on the team. So those I would say is kind of like a really understand, is a deep dive into the opportunity and really understand what is your career growth path will be on the team. That is very important.
That's wonderful. Thank you both. I'm seeing a couple of different people have asked questions on this topic. And so we have talked a lot about like green flags, yes, but everyone has had this, or many people have had this experience where you interview and then you realize it's not a good fit. And so do you have any advice for when you do realize it's not a good fit, or, you know, kind of what your next steps are at that point? And I'll pass it to Varsha because I see you nodding. So I'm hoping that means you're ready to go. Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So it depends on like what were the red flags. If they were obvious, like human red flags or like cultural red flags that should never exist, I would encourage everybody to bring this out, like with HR, with names also, right? Like the company needs to know that the people are behaving XYZ in an interview, right? Like, and we shouldn't be encouraging that. Now, if it is just a mutual, like, okay, I don't like this, you know, or then of course, you know, I would say that's fine. Like, you know, politely decline, give your reasons for it, and it's fine. That's my 2 cents. Yes. Liangxiao, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I would say is probably, and I also ask, like, if you already select the job, right, on the team, you find it's not a good fit, and how would it be? So like, yes, if you interview, find it not a good fit, probably what Varsha says, if you're already on the team. So I would first ask is why? Why I do not feel it's a good fit? Is that a culture? Is that a project? Or is that a people I work with? If it's a project, go find your manager and talk about this, right? So tell them what I'm passionate about it. And I would love to work on these things. Typically manager should empower you, right? Like really find the good match, good fit for you. That like will use your strengths and also, let's say, motivates you to do the work every day. Because often I see a lot of people get demotivated. It's the project they're not interested in, right? So like, and I think like really helping your manager to understand who you are and then help you to find the right opportunity. That is very important. If this is a purely a people or culture fit issue, I would say is like talk to the leaders of the org to understand why and understand what are the changes the leader is making, right? If leader do not feel so, then I would say it's a time for you to move on.
Thank you both for those answers for both sides, before and after. Here is another question from someone like a current employee. So this participant, they said, I heard companies are doing all of these innovative things to attract people. So what if you are a current employee at the company and you want to encourage them to take some of these practices on in adopting strategies to continue hiring diverse candidates? Is it okay for the employee to speak up? How would you recommend and who to go to if they want to help with that initiative?
Yeah, I would think like recruiting would be the right person to go speak with, right? Like, I think DoorDash is a classic example where we don't wait for a particular department to make a change, right? Like in 2017, we had no diversity and inclusion separate department, right? But at the same time, anybody who had diversity ideas, for example, women in Engine lunch, right? We started it ourselves. We said, okay, we want to do this and we're going to do it, right? So I feel like we shouldn't wait. So somebody, when I was earlier in my career, somebody told me, at a workplace, nothing is not your problem. Like that, not your problem should never come up, because at a workplace, and that's the leading strategy, right? Like that's how you will win. So nothing should be not your problem, right? So if you see that your company is not adopting to, some of these strategies that other companies are adopting to, that you're listening here in this webinar or somewhere else, and you want to propose that, I would say organize your thoughts, put them down on paper. Like talking sometimes doesn't register, very well. So put them down on paper, and then take this paper, document, whatever, to many key people, not just one, right? So maybe it's HR, maybe it's your manager, maybe it's a VP of engineering in my case, right? Like, it's just CC people saying, I have these awesome ideas that we should be including, right? And someone will hear, right? I do feel like companies with come with good intentions, and they want to do the right things. And so, of course, companies have constraints also, so not everything may be heard, but whatever can be heard, I'm sure like the companies will hear.
We're actually almost out of time, and I apologize, there were so many amazing questions. We're not going to get to every one of them. I just will ask a quick shout out to Cordell. A lot of people are asking about apprenticeship programs or early career programs. And if we have an answer to put in the chat, that would be wonderful. I unfortunately do not know that answer. But to close up for both of our panelists, what is like the one thing that you would like people to come away from this event? We shared so many frameworks, so many things to think about. What's the thing that you want people to leave today remembering?
I can start. I would say is know your priorities, know your strengths, and that will really help you to find the job you really like, and you will shine.
Yeah. Following up, I feel like we spoke about a lot of positive nuggets here on this webinar, a lot of things to take away. But the one thing that we didn't speak about, which also you should take away, is basically rejection is a part of the game, right? So you will get no's from companies. And the one thing to keep in mind is don't get discouraged. Do not get discouraged, keep trying. If it's a no, it's probably because it's not a mutual match, something that the company saw that you didn't. So take it positively, move on. The right opportunity is ahead, and go get it.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, DoorDash. Thank you to our panelists. This has been absolutely amazing. We hope you have a great rest of the morning because you are on the West Coast. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you. Thank you for attending.